Monday, October 21st, starting at around 10:15, and it's being held at 851 Grand Concourse, room 600, Bronx, New York, 10451. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Marisol Halpern. I'm your Director of Borough Operations for the Bronx Borough President, Vanessa Gibson. And as always, we'll start with roll call so that everyone can identify themselves. And we'll start with the Chair of Community Board 1, Community Board 2.
Good morning, Rob Acevedo, District Manager, representing Community Board. Good morning.
Community Board 3, Community Board 4.
Good morning, everyone. Board Chair.
Community Board 5, Community Board 6, Community Board 7, Community Board 8, Community Board 9, Community Board 10, Community Board 11, and Community Board 12. Council member rep from District 8. Thank you. District 11. District 12. District 13.
Good morning, Chair. Mark Knights, Director of Legislation, Councilmember Marrado.
14.
Samantha Cardenas on behalf of Councilmember P.D. Sanchez.
15. Council member from District 16. 17.
Good morning, Saranya Jagadish, here for Councilman Zone.
And Council member District 18. Glad to have you all here. Today we have the two presentations, one of which is one that we've been waiting for a bit, so we're very excited to have the New York State Liquor Authority available to discuss our licensing process, as well as how its impact on the open dining initiative. So we would like to welcome Chairperson Lily M. Fan from the State Liquor Authority.
Thank you, Ms. Halpern, and thank you to Borough President Vanessa Gibson for inviting me here. I have yet to meet her, but I would really love the opportunity to chat with her about the Bronx priorities. So this in the front here is David Stoller. All of you should know him. He is our Zone 1 Regional Director. And get his card. I'll also give you my card when I get done here. So you should reach out to me on policy issues. You should reach out to him on individual licensing issues or anything that have to do with complaints, etc. Again, I am Lily Fan, and I am chair and commissioner of the agency. I have two titles because I chair the agency, which means that I run the day-to-day administration of the agency, but I also am a voting commissioner on what we call full board, which is where a lot of the licensing issues that come up for you get adjudicated, and also where when we have enforcement matters, all those items come to full board. I actually never expected to be running an agency. Many years ago, I was legislative counsel in the Senate in 2010. I started in the area of social services, and that's actually how I started knowing about issues in the Bronx. I was working for Senator Squadron in Lower East Side, but we were obviously running social services for statewide. And then I actually became a producer and also had a small business on my own. At some point, I was sort of I got, jaded about working on different political campaigns, and so I decided to join the community board, and that's actually how I started learning about restaurants and nightlife issues. So I don't think it's too much to say that I am the defender of community boards in the whole chain of command that I'm in. I was on CB4 in Manhattan for 4 years. I was the secretary of the board and really learned about licensing issues through that lens. Just out of nowhere, I was offered an opportunity to become the part-time commissioner on the state food board, and so that's when I started in 2018. I did that for 5 years, and last year there was some shifts in leadership, and Chamber called and said, for your elevation. They don't really ask you at that point whether you want a job, they just say you are now being elevated. And I went from a part-time commissioner that worked 3 days every other week to becoming full-time chair of the agency. So in a way, this came out of nowhere, but at the same time, I also had spent 10 years preparing for this job that I didn't know I was gonna have. I had learned, again, about the licensing issues and mostly concerned about community concerns. And so I really invite you to communicate with us about things that you're concerned about, because I value your experience, your knowledge enormously, and don't ever assume that we know what you're thinking. When you write a letter, it is really helpful for us to get the story and the context, and not just like a form letter. If you're really concerned about a location, you're concerned about a street corner, the more specifics you give us, the more we have to work with. So I've been in this job since June of last year. My job was confirmed by the Senate, and then again, I got confirmed again this past June, so I've been sort of under the microscope a lot. Many of you know about our backlog, and that was sort of one of the reasons why I was put into this job, is to move the train along and get licenses out. But my focus has always been to make sure that the community's input is not forgotten just because we're trying to move licenses out. And what I've done in response to that is actually changing the schedule of full board. Also for 5 years, because we had full board every other week, I never went anywhere for 5 years for more than 10 days because I had to show up for meetings. And now for my part-time commissioners, I feel like it's more fair to move it every third week. And also I did that so that you have more time to tell us about your concerns if an item is coming up on full board. So the way the schedule works now is meeting is every third week, and the agenda is posted 2 weeks prior. And so before, everybody had about 5 working days to get through that, but now you have 2 weeks. So I encourage all the district managers to really go through, to make regular efforts to look at our agenda and identify items that are in your district, and really check back with your own documentation, see if you have issues, see if you have recent complaints, because now a lot of, as you guys know, and we can talk more about that, a lot of businesses are operating on temps. And as much as we support, temp permits going out, that's also an opportunity for you to have seen how these businesses are operating. And if someone is really violating the law while they're on a temp, we want to know about that. We want to hear loudly about what the concerns are. If there's a lot of noise, there are certain hour issues, they're doing dancing when they're not supposed to, they're having live bands. Tell us about it so that we can tell the applicant to come in and have a conversation when the item comes up at full board. And so that's one way for you to engage with us in a more productive manner. Other changes I've made at the full board, at the agency, is we've really decentralized. We have 9 different bureaus, 9 different functions, and instead of having 2 or 3 people that are very capable to run the whole agency, now we really are trying to decentralize it, and now 9 different people actually make decisions for the different bureaus: licensing, enforcement, secretary's office, hearing bureau, and then counsel's office, zone directors. And we do a relatively good job with when we are making policy decisions decisions, trying to bring everybody to the table. Sometimes those conversations are difficult, but we do have policy conversations. We know outdoor dining, I know some of you are very concerned about that. We have a roundtable of 12 people at our agency so that we're hearing all your comments. Everybody's bringing what they hear on the street to the table. It's not just they're doing their work and then now these 3 other people are making the decision not knowing what's going on the ground. We have also, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's also been a lot of energy to actually make changes in the area of alcohol distribution and consumption. And that is not because of me. I'm only one factor. I think Governor Kathy Hochul, who gave me the appointment, along with her team, it's much more curious about this area. They're much less controlled by the powerful forces in alcohol law, and they're really looking at how to support their mission. You know, the governor's priorities, as you know, affordability is number 1, mental health is number 2, and public safety is number 3. And I would say alcohol has to do with all 3 of these things. And so there is a much, better conversation. There's a much open lines of communication about what the agency and what our laws can actually change in order to support affordability and particularly public safety. There's also a lot newer members in the legislature, as you know. We are constantly talking to Assemblymember Alvarez and all the senators that represent the Bronx. There are many of them, and Senator Hernandez is on the substance abuse side. So we work closely with both of those teams and other teams to try to create change for this area. And it's a much better conversation. It's a lot more work, but there is really an energy for change, and I really invite all of you to participate in that on both ways. There's opening of distribution, and then there's also trying to do better enforcement and trying to do better work in maintaining public safety. And because of that change, again, not because of me, this past cycle, there were 9 alcohol-related items that passed actually in the budget, one of which is the non-contiguous service and allowing alcohol service to cross bike lanes, which we can talk more about. And other things, like adding liquor to one-day permits, allowing liquor in movie theaters so that they match legit theaters, things like that had been sort of in the system. None of those are new ideas, but they actually passed in this cycle. And then when we then got to the regular legislative session, we were able to allow liquor stores to carry more items like that, resemble gifts, etc. And then we did a big thing called direct-to-consumer shipping, which is really aimed to support the manufacturing sector. So right now it's October. We just got through our, believe it or not, we spent the whole summer planning for next cycle already. And so we just submitted our budget request for the agency. In the past year, we had 53 promotions at the State Liquor Authority. I'm pretty proud of that. It's something that we, again, got really a lot of support from civil service, from DOB, the Department of Budget, and also from OGS, which is the Office of General Services, which support our agency. I didn't know how all of this worked, but when I started, it was a quick study. I had to figure out how to get the necessary promotions for my staff that has sort of long been neglected. And 53 promotions, that's about 40% of our staff. The agency last year processed 86,000 applications and permit requests and brand labeling requests and one-day permits and temporary permits. That's 86,000 items that are coming through as a request. We, in licensing, even today, have 77 people. So that's basically each person processing about 1,000 items.
And so I give you that context not to make excuses about our backlog, but also to give you a context of things get lost. Sometimes there's human error, and sometimes, and I am still trying to figure it out, is sometimes we make a mistake that we cannot explain. Sometimes I ask about applications that should have moved through, and they can find it and was like, oh, this should have gotten out, we'll get it out now. It's at this point still slightly hard to figure out why it was stuck, but things get stuck because we're processing 86,000 in 1 year. In our proposals this year, besides our budget requests, we are also doing our policy proposals as an agency. And so that's where you guys come in. You know, there are a lot of, you know, we're trying to propose, for example, new licensing categories. It's a conversation that we want to involve the community because we know that there are businesses that want to operate a certain way that our laws don't allow. And we take a lot of time saying no to people when really it's because the law is drafted in a very, you know, in a way that was not contemplating these business methods. And so we want to make sure that all the ideas are coming through and we're capturing them because it's actually faster for us. It's crazy to think this, but it's actually faster for us to get a piece of legislation passed and for things to be able to be a yes instead of us taking time for a no. Because every time someone gets a no, last year, I think there were 9,500 applications. We approved maybe 7,500 of them. For those 25% that got a no, they then ask for a reconsideration, which means that the agency does the work twice. And then we have to really now explain in writing why it was a no. It's because the law doesn't allow it. And we as an agency no longer want to be the people standing between, you know, the people wanting to do a creative way of business and their actual business. And so we want to try to find ways to license people. But of course, you know, with no disturbances and no added traffic or any of the things that the community boards are concerned about. So I want it to be an open conversation. David has drafted a whole bunch of one-pagers for you guys to use and communicate with us and try to figure out how best to communicate your complaints and concerns over saturation, any issues like that. You know, we would love to hear from you. We work very closely with PD and all the localities. But in New York City, the community board is the locality, so I really invite you to build a personal relationship with David so that, if we have a question, he can call you. Like, that's really important too. Like, sometimes we're at full board, and I'm like, David, I need to know what this community board thinks about this one thing. Or, so like, I think that as close as you can get to that, like, sometimes, like, we really do rely on the district managers. Like, that's the truth. Like, if you're saying in the letter, don't give them the license, sometimes that's not helpful. If you lay out the boundaries of under what circumstance you will be supportive of a license, that's actually more helpful to us. And if you don't want hours, say that. As much detail as you can give us, the more we can follow you. So I also want to mention, I think you guys know this, one of our part-time commissioner is Edgar de Leon, who is from the Bronx, and he's, he's former NYPD and a really respectable and, great addition to our board. And so I encourage you to maybe invite him here and talk, and so that he can tell you about his method of voting and what he thinks about all of this, and he's really a great asset, and so I encourage you to get to know him as well. I know we want to talk about outdoor dining and licensing, so if you guys want to, I'm going to stop here, and maybe it's better for you guys to ask specific questions.
Thank you for that. You shared a lot of information, and it's going to take a lot of digesting, but I just have a quick question. Out of the 89,000, are you able to tell us how many of those were from the Bronx? And if possible, by community board?
That. It's a good question. We can look into it.
30,000 license holders in New York City, about.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, overall, we have 59,000 licensees in this state, and about 45,000 of which are bars and taverns, and 30,000 of which are in.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any of the chairs or city council members have any questions? Ms. Bond?
So let me answer that a couple different ways. So right now, the front portal is only taking permits. For the real application, it's still on paper, as you know, and that eventually will change, maybe in the next year or so. Right now, if you send in a hard copy application, it takes about 30 days for that to get registered into our system because it actually involves human entering data. Before I started, it was about a 9 to 10 month wait. Right now, the wait is just under 6 months. So, having said that, there is also a push, as you know, from the legislature to get temp permits more available. And so this past cycle, besides the direct shipping bill, the other big bill that the legislature passed is the temporary permit bill. And that actually did two things. One is increasing OPs, which is on-premise service licenses, from 90 days to 180 days. So when you get a temporary permit, it's now for 6 months. So the whole goal of that is so that you do not have to renew, because as I said, the queue is about 6 months. So those should work out. The other thing that the legislature changed is that there used to be a rule of 2-year look back. If that location had not been licensed for 2 years, you are not allowed to apply for a temporary permit. And I think the thinking behind that before was that it may have bad history and, or it was out of business, and there was some thought that those locations, the landlords would then turn it back into a laundromat or a bookstore or something like that. That was I think the legislature really wanted that, but I think it was very clear that landlords were not turning these back into regular businesses, and they still wanted restaurants, and then they were just renting to a restaurant and then having to wait for the license. And so now temporary permits are more available. How long does it take for someone to get a temporary permit? So it's a separate application from the actual hard copy. Temporary permit is applied for online. I'm sorry, this is a long answer, but this is the life. This is the life. But the temporary permit is applied online, and if it's not a 500-foot case, you guys all know what that is. If it's not a 500-foot case, it actually takes only 7 to 10 days to come out. However, if it's a 500-foot case, it takes about 3 to 4 weeks. So those are the time frames. If it's not a 500-foot temporary permit application, they can't file the permit unless they have a standing application, but it's supposed to come through within 10 days. Sometimes the permit is coming out before people even have renovated. So, another piece of this is the 30-day notice, which, there is a lot of, I would honestly say that, in the system, there's a lot of squeeze to try to not involve the community board and try to, they're only advisory, they shouldn't be controlling the process. But the truth is, I don't agree with that at all, and I really try to work hard to push against that. In the budget, and that was an idea that was already kicking around, and I opposed to it. I was totally opposed to it, but it passed anyway. But what I was able to do, so the idea and what passed in the budget is that when applicants file the application before, they had to give notice to the community board, wait 30 days, and then file with the SLA. The budget actually took that away. that you technically no longer need to wait 30 days between putting in your community board notice and actually getting your license, sending your license application. But what we've done on our end, I mean, this is the only way I can work around that, because, that's the great thing about the law is, there's the law and then there's the workaround. What we've said is you can send it, but we will not act on it until after 30 days. So that we still give the community board sufficient time, because I know how the community boards work. I know what your cycles are. Less than 30 days is completely unrealistic. 30 days is pushing it, so I'm still trying, so we won't act on it until 30 days has already passed on the actual application. The temp may go out. So that's, in a way, this is actually my favorite meeting to do, honestly, I've done this in a couple other bureaus, is because it's really, really important that you guys understand the nuances of how tight the schedule is now as our licensing is getting faster and faster, and how it's really important to stay active and communicate and make sure that we're hearing from you in a timely fashion. Because there will be the day, hopefully, that the wait is going to be 3 to 4 months. We're taking applications in the front portal. That 30-day window is going to get closer and closer, and that, if at that point we're issuing licenses in 2 months, people will probably stop applying for the temporary permit, and we then really need to hear what you think, immediately, based on your knowledge of the person who's applying, based on your knowledge of what's in that area, the density, all of those things, right? And I would say one word about, complaining. It does not help to get a letter that says, this is within 500 foot of 3 other licenses, don't give it. That's not, as much as that follows the rule, it describes what the 500-foot rule is, but it's not that helpful for the board. And it's very hard for us to tell a business, you can't have this business, because the lawyers would just be like, no, you always do this, right? But I need something that is just much more meaty, right? If someone is saying, I live in this tenement building, the sound travels, is this material and it reflects off the wall. If people are saying my bed is shaking, or the smoke is coming into my window, my children cannot sleep, I cannot work. Those are the specifics that we need to hear. 4 people coming from 4 blocks away that says this is quality of life is not a complaint. That's not helpful. That's a waste of time. So.
Do you have a one sheet or something you can take, so there are a lot of nuances and a lot of information?
Yeah, so David has them, and he will share them.
Yeah, Rafael, can you give, at least,
Yeah, we have a whole bunch of one-pagers that we started drafting, and they're very, very meaty and a lot of details.
Yeah, the question was, is this on?
1 page.
The question was, we do need, it is a lot of nuances, it is a lot of information for us to retain. For many of us, I'm the chair of 12, this is not my expertise, and so you're dumping a lot of important information, but we do need something that we can take and reflect and share back with the board.
Yeah, so David has them. He can email them over. We're still working on finalizing the outdoor dining one and temporary permit one. But,
Yeah.
and you can call me. I'm gonna give you my card, and if you have questions, you can call me again.
That's awesome. So as soon as we get the 1-pagers from David, I'll make sure that everybody gets it. I believe, did you have something? Community Board 8? No. Okay, go ahead, Rafael. from
Thank you,
Board 2.
Marisol, and thank you, Commissioner, for coming out and sharing your experiences with community boards. I think that makes a big difference for us. I can be an hour easily asking you questions and for guidance, and
That's
David
okay.
as well. Thank you. I know the ABC laws, I was told from SLA, they're from prohibition. So to hear that things are moving and you're trying to adjust, I think that's a good thing. I have two major concerns that my board asked me to present here. One is when we're doing renewal applications, we know the date that it expires, and then the applicant will send us the 30-day notice. If there are concerns with that application, or because of the previous 2 years, there's been a lot of police activity, and just a scenario, the board may object to the renewal, but somehow they already, is like automatically renewed, even before they come to the board.
Yep.
So that's one, you know, if you can briefly discuss that. And then the second thing, man, for now, is bodegas. So bodegas are just to notify the board. We can't ask a bodega to come before the board. And then there are some bodegas, you know, they're bad actors, and they're allowing for a lot of illegal activity occurring around selling beer, and they're drinking it even the front or inside, and it causes a bigger headache. And then the police will, the local precinct will also object to it, and we really don't get no correspondence. But I do want to acknowledge that for Board 2, and I'm 8 years now the district manager, the State Liquor Authority has always been like supportive of communities boards advisory role, and I would love to see that continue. And I'm really excited to see you here. So thank you once again for coming.
Good, thank you. And I know you've come to full board, so you know.
Yes, I
You know,
go to
when we
full
have
board.
questions, I have been kicking items over because I'm waiting for community board input. Like, I sometimes review material and I'm like, I don't even know what community board thinks, like, kick this over. So applicants know that, like, don't come forward unless, don't try to come to us when you don't have what you want from the community board. You got to go work it out with the
I have
community
experienced
board.
that. Thank you.
So we do that a lot. So with bodegas, let me start with the bodegas first because renewal is a longer answer. So I would say that this is where it's important to look at the full board agenda. However, I probably agree with you that bodegas are getting approved mostly just at the licensing board level and it's not coming to full board. And a lot of them are corporate changes. Unless they have a bad history or someone has, there's some kind of conflict, it's not coming to full board. So they are just getting licensed, and unfortunately, then you have to go to enforcement. You have to go to our website and file and say they are serving on, we see that a lot, with the bodegas. They sometimes have gambling machines, sometimes have on-premise service, which is not allowed. They're selling THC products, Viagra, antibiotics, anything. It's all over the place. So we have, and they likely have the most, most responsiveness when we do sell to minor checks. So it is a problem. I would say that if you know that there's an application that's about to come in and you're concerned about that location, I would write a letter. Even if you don't have the right to see them, you can say that this location is of concern. But we have to get them on the enforcement side. But it's a problem because then they just sell it to their cousin and they, it's convoluted, and then they do some kind of transaction, and ultimately it's the same family that's controlling it. And we try really hard to go after that, but it's very, very difficult. We're literally looking at, this bodega has this guy's pill bottles, his name, his prescribed medication is in the location, and that's why we know that this person who got canceled before is still there. It comes down to that, it's a cat and mouse game. It's hard to control it, but I would file complaints. That's the really only way to do it, and it's constant complaints, right? Because it's crazy because our licensing staff are like the people that are ready to say no. Our investigators sometimes are like the nicest people. And so they, it's like this yin yang thing that's going on with my agency, which I'm trying to fix. And I tell the investigators, I mean, if you're getting complaints, like you need to go out, but we don't have a lot of staff, DOT in New York City has 120 inspectors. We have 32 statewide. So, but if you think that bodegas is, collectively a problem, I would love to work with the members and try to do a task force, right? I mean, we can always target them, Sell to minor task force are always at bodegas. And if they do 4 sales within 2 years, it's a cancellation. But again, the people, they keep control of these businesses and it's a problem, If they're caught with gambling machines, it's a $3,000 fine. But we know that they make about $500 a day on those machines, so the incentive is to buy another one as soon as one gets taken by the police. But call the police, file a complaint on our website, and we will get out there. Yeah, do both, yeah. And so the renewals, sorry, this is another long answer. So we have a computer system called Leap, which I would not go into details about. We've launched it about a year ago. It's very filled with bugs. It pretty much has a brain of its own. We're trying to fix it. While we're trying to fix it, we have allowed businesses to do renewals online. But that's neither here nor there for your question, because what you're asking is whether when we renew, new conditions can be placed onto the license. And that's something that our agency probably has to look at. My understanding is that 2 chairs ago, they did pull up renewals and bring them to full board because there are community complaints. Our prior chair did not do that, and renewals, it's essentially automatic. And so it really doesn't, I know that some boards spent time hearing renewals and trying to get new stipulations in and stuff like that, but the truth is that we don't have a process for that to stick as part of the license. We just don't. And so I feel badly that some of you may be wasting your time doing that, but right now it's not being registered on our end. It's not going on the license, nothing. So the only way, we do that because ultimately our agency owes a licensee a due process. If we were to change the boundaries of their method of operation, we have to bring them through a disciplinary process. And so if you have complaints, a lot of police activity, we need actual referrals from the police, and we need actual complaints filed on our website. And that will actually trigger an enforcement case. Our investigators will go out. If it's a police referral, it goes straight to counsel's office, and charges just get filed if we get a police referral. But we need to get a police referral, and I'm happy to, we haven't done anything yet. I don't think I've been in the same room with NYPD since I started as a commissioner, like way back when some of you know Mike Jones. He was very well connected with NYPD, and so I remember him bringing me to an NYPD forum. I don't even know if they have those anymore, and I would love to talk to NYPD and get in a room with them and make them understand how important it is to use us when we actually should be shutting down a business and not, other things.
Thank you for being transparent there with that, and I hope we have local elected official staff here. Hopefully they could translate that back to the electeds and our state electeds as well, so that something maybe moving forward can
Yeah, let us think more about that. It's something that's worth, this has come up a lot. It's just that we owe them the due process. So how do we do that without violating their rights, right? Because, every single time someone is getting a noise complaint, it's only one neighbor and they just hate me, it's like, and so we have to balance that, right? NYPD evidence would be helpful.
Thank you for being candid, Commissioner.
Yep.
I appreciate that. And I guess we'll follow up on that,
Yeah, let
Commissioner,
us
just to see how,
look into the renewal
how
thing.
we can get,
Yeah,
how we can get some kind of resolution to that.
sure.
I have Community Board 1 and Community Board 6. And I do appreciate. You need the mic anyway.
Thank you, Marisol. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming. And you know, I understand that you. My name is Anthony Jordan. I'm the district manager for Bronx Community Board 1, representing Mount Haven, Port Morris, and Melrose. David, good to see you here. I wanted to talk more about outreach. I know that there was a glitch in the system where we were receiving outreach documentation as it relates to either renewals or folks who were getting licenses that were coming from other boroughs. So how is your office working to correct some technology glitches that is giving information as relates to, like you said, we should look for the agendas and when meetings are coming up and so on, but we may be getting glitches that come from other boroughs that has nothing to do with Bronx community boards. How is your team working to help upgrade that? Is there, in the budget, was there any anticipation in increasing, because your inspectors, because you said something about the inspectors versus the enforcement team, and how that kind of cohesiveness of connection works better to help maybe tell the story where we provide the information, but tell the story on the ground so that the board can make a decision that's valuable for the community. For instance, we have had for the issue with, and I'll conclude with this, where we had a business that was quote unquote sold, but kept the same name. So that left the difference of it being sold, but it was connected to an alleged a murder, along with some other underage selling and other serious activities that have been happening in the district, and they basically applied for a new license only because the name changed, but the business name stood the same. So how is the team working to look at those instances where those things happen? Because we provided the 311 and the 911 complaints. We have NYPD who comes and testify every month to our committee to talk about when there are issues of that. Basically, these people should not be receiving licenses. We CC council, the borough president, et cetera. We're just concerned about how much leverage our work brings it on the ground to your team to ensure that these businesses understand the work that first our volunteer board members do, and then the work that our officers do to make sure that businesses also get a fair shake on our end, but also the community does. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I clarify the question about the outreach? Like, what was that, like?
So
What do you mean
sometimes I
glitches?
get a letter about a business in Brooklyn that says, you know, the Brooklyn's business denials, or Brooklyn gets
Oh,
gets
you
approved
mean
and so
that
on.
when
so we
Lee
get
was prompting
where the
improper
SLA,
denials?
Right. So SLA, right, reaches
Yeah,
out to us,
I
and
know.
sometimes we get some Brooklyn, and sometimes we get some other folks.
We're
I know,
trying.
so I know there's some glitches in the system, and we
I know.
understand that. You know, I just want to make that clear. How is your team working? Because we know that this is. I understand how sometimes you
You're
come
not
in,
getting
you
them
try to-
right now, are you?
Yes.
You're
we
still
are.
getting them?
We are, Commissioner.
Oh my God. Yeah, so if he hasn't gotten one, then we gotta fix something.
Right.
It's an ongoing thing. You know, we just had a big meeting last week with ITS, our team. I mean, literally, I was crying, like our leadership was crying. I mean, it's bad. It's a bad system that they gave us. ITS is our sister agency. You know, I think they've decided to not work with this vendor anymore, and that they're going to go into fixes. But, you know, we are talking about 650 defects that we have on our list. So it's a work in progress, and I guess, you know, ITS would say that all software launches are bad. You know, the one we have is particularly bad. It's kind of have a brain on its own, as you would see. And I thought we had stopped the emails out, but let us look into that. The automated rejection emails. But if they don't have anything to do with you, just delete it. I know that it's so not helpful because we're trying to ask you to communicate more, but we're sending you random stuff that doesn't even matter to you, and it's like, how does that work? But we are looking at it, and hopefully those would really, really stop. As far as budget for more investigators, we have included some requests for it because we have this new shipping rule that is, coming up. Outdoor dining, again, we still have to talk about that. So we expect to need more staffing. But I think you guys know that the political, direction, it's, there's just a lack of will to govern in a way on all fronts. And I think it's not politically savvy to necessarily say, we're going to give SLA a whole bunch of more investigators, right? And in COVID, I think we earned such a bad rep that everybody is still trying to recover from that. So I'm trying to get more staff for licensing so that the answers get addressed. Like, we're trying to add more layers of supervisors and a lawyer in licensing so that some of the concern is addressed in the front end and not on the back end. Because, like you said, there are businesses that shouldn't have a license and are now getting a license because we missed it when we were in the licensing process. In fact, there's no real, because I've been on food board for now 6 years, there's no real connectivity between us issuing license by accident and then on the other side, very rarely does it end up as a cancellation. But those people probably shouldn't have a license because it's a disturbance to the public. And it's such hard work to get people actually closed down. I mean, it takes years. And sadly, multiple dead bodies, multiple drug raids, multiple bad situations for a business to actually get closed down. And that's real. And, I thank you for bringing up the issues about corporate changes, because the assumption in the system, and maybe we need to rethink that, is that if someone is selling a business, presumably the new person will get vetted based on our licensing. We have boundaries about who can get a license, who's not. As long as you're not a convicted felon, essentially you can get a license. So if you have no bad history, likely you're going to get approved for that corporate change, right? But if the location have bad history, then likely the item is coming to full board. And that's when we need to communicate more, because very rarely are we getting a community board saying, don't approve this corporate change because of that bad history. And somehow, that's a higher bar, right? Like, we have to be able to look at ourselves and comfortably say, these new business owners should not be allowed to purchase this business because of something that happened there before. And they're gonna argue, oh, that was spontaneous and it wasn't us, but however, if they also have questionable history, we can limit it, right? If you are participating in the conversation, it gives me more power to limit it. If the community board is not in the room, then I'm just going on, I don't know, I'm just making it up. And so it's hard to say no to someone without someone else help. I'm not hiding behind you, but again, it needs to be a balance. People love to tell me, oh, you screwed the community board and you also screwed the business, but that's my job. I'm supposed to land in the middle, right? They may get the business, but then they have to close at 12 until they prove to you that they deserve it. And so I'm asking for that conversation.
I wanted to say one thing, and then I'll definitely show it to my colleague, because the SLA and our interaction is now one of the last or the only opportunity we have with the change now in nightlife and how the administration has changed with how they interact with businesses, where there used to be a multi-agency interaction with businesses. Now with that change happening, it is our interaction on behalf of the businesses sometimes is the only point of connection to ensuring that businesses who need to be shut down or acting in inappropriate ways or impacting communities and quality of life is through the community board and through the work. And that's why this interaction or your agency's interaction with us is extremely urgently important. And I'm sure my colleagues agree with us.
I mean, it makes me sad that we're left holding the bag, so to speak. You know, that everybody has backed off and was just like, well, let the state be the bad guys, right? But, you know, I don't know. I guess I feel like I was on full board that, like, we were always the ones to say no, so let that be and let the communication be stronger between us and the community boards, and then we'll keep doing the work. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Rafael.
Hi, I'm Rafael More, Board 6. I had a question about scheduling future appearances before the board. Like, if I have a business that gets denied or it gets tabled, and then I don't see it on the next agenda for the next meeting, how do I know when they're up again? Because, you know, like in civil court, if a case gets adjourned 3 months out, you see the date, so you know when to go. And I would really like to attend more of your board meetings to speak about businesses that are problems.
Yeah.
But it's kind of difficult to have to wander around your website every 3 weeks trying to find the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I would just set make it every third Wednesday, that is the week after board meeting, to look. You know, that's the only way to do it. I mean, we've received a request and we're working on it against this technology, is that trying to identify the address with the board number. But you know, honestly, it's just like, I can't, you know, I worry that we try to do it, but then it's wrong. Because, you know, but, you know, perhaps Secretary's office can humanly do it, right? I mean, it's something that we do. It's just a function to add. But stay in contact with David, right? If you're actually tracking something that is very important, and there's some really bad history there, I mean, I think that we're really talking about maybe for each of the boards, there are 10 locations that are like that, right? That you really care about, and you really would like to see that not licensed. Make sure David knows that, because then he can help you track it. You know, if it comes up, like, he can start looking at it for you. And you can always ask him, you know, when is this gonna go? And then he will call Secretary's office and find out when it's gonna go and why it's not going. Because often is we send the applicant back to the community board, and then it's supposed to be on the next one, and then somehow the lawyer is sick, or they can't get in front of, or they got in front of a committee and didn't get in front of a full board, then they want another 3-week extension. But I will tell you that if you make a lot of noise among those 6 weeks or 9 weeks, we've seen a lot of withdrawals in other boards that exist, like in CB3. If you're in the Health Square area and, you know, they know that you are operating until 3 a.m. under a temporary permit, they know that you're having dancing in the basement and you're supposed to be a burger joint, you're not getting the license, and they are going through, you know, they might have gotten, you know, they withdraw their application. They don't even bother. They're just closing the business. So you might, you know, it's on you to sort of be active about it to create that outcome, if that's what the community wants. I'm not saying shut anybody down, but, you know.
My question was also around a problem business, like you mentioned, you know, a business where people are getting shot on a regular basis, and there are multiple homicides connected to club promoters at a club in my district. You're saying that the renewals really isn't a venue for us to express our concerns? Like, what should we do? Because I want to attach stipulations on the renewal, but I don't know if they're going to be heard.
No, those actually, I mean, if you have stipulations, we need to look at that. I mean, that's something that, you know, it's worth for us to change the policy on it, perhaps. But in the meantime, is you go to our website and you file a complaint on our website, and you say clearly multiple homicides, you know, should not be operating. You know, you can send letters over to David, and he will forward it over to our enforcement staff.
Don't wait for renewal.
No, don't wait for renewal. That's like unrelated. The renewal is part of licensing. Enforcement is the compliance side. Like, we actually operate 2 different agencies. with 150 people running everything, you know, the 86,000 applications and 59,000 licenses, 25,000 renewals every year. 25,000 renewals. So we don't have time to stop and look at the letters that are coming in, and we just don't have that step right now. So don't create that step, not right now. Go to, always, when an incident happens, file a complaint. You know, we would love to hear from community boards because you're the one who knows what's happening on the ground, right? We are only, you know, again, I don't have bodies on the street. You know, a lot of our investigations is like, I read something in the press and I'm sending it to my own people, right? And all of you can be doing that. Like, look at this event, you know? I mean, if a shooting happens outside of an establishment, like, you know, sometimes that's hard. But if it's something happening inside and there's stabbings happening inside, and, you know, or, you know, there's a lot of thefts, or, you know, people are getting fights in the bathroom line, like things like that, the more you send us complaints, the better it is that we have a track record. And don't rely on the 311 calls, because that also comes to us at the very end of the process. Like, you think that we're getting 311 calls, we don't. That's a separate system, we can't see that. So that may come up in our counsel's office case at the very end of a process. Oh, you know, this place had 600 311 calls in 2 years. You know, and then the licensee is gonna come up and say, oh, that's because we're in the same plaza with 3 other businesses and everything is happening in the parking lot. Like, everybody has that defense, right? But if you know that something happened, some blood was, you know, shed inside of establishment, you need to file a complaint immediately.
Thank you. I do appreciate the time that you're giving us with your
No, this
answers.
is super, super important to me. I just want you to know that you have a thankless job, all of you electeds as well. So, you know, we want to be here to support you. You know, ultimately we have 150 people, but we really, you know, try to take as much as we can in and serve the public in the proper way.
I think the
I
Community
have
Board
one last
7 has
question.
one, and then
Oh, sure.
we'll
Thank
leave
you,
it at that.
Marisol.
Again,
So we work very closely with NYPD in terms of revising new applications. Now, for renewals, should we be pushing, if we have, I guess, a lot of red flags for allocation, should we be really pushing our precinct to send complaints? Because I did see on your website that
No,
they
if
can
you
fill
have
out
a
a
good
form and
relationship with your
everything.
precinct, some of them will and some of them will not. But if we hear from them, that's great. As long as they're not, you know, with some kind of other, you know, sometimes they are invested for a different reason. But as long as it's legit, like, we'll take it, you know. You know, Commissioner De Leon, you can ask him about it. Like, I mean, he definitely takes those, you know, police letters seriously.
And then my other question is there a way that we could get a reaction from any letters that we send with stipulations? We don't ever hear back, and I'm just wondering if maybe a little reaction, a little thumb up or anything. I do know you have a high volume.
So we get thousands of emails. I mean, if it didn't bounce back, assume we got it. Right now, we're not set up to have a response, but maybe one day. But let me just say one word. I know you want to move on, but I want to say one word about the outdoor dining because we haven't really
That's
talked
fine.
about it.
I just wanted to be mindful of the time that you're
Oh,
sharing
no,
with
that's
us.
okay. I don't have any. I just have to go to Albany at some point today, so it's okay. But outdoor dining. I know everybody is very concerned about it. What we know is there are 3,300 applications that's been filed with DOT. I do not know how many in the Bronx. I do not know if any of you have received any applications. I assume not, because DOT, I do not believe, have even started issuing any of the permits. The deadline supposedly to apply with the SLA is January 1, but probably that will get pushed back. As I mentioned before, as part of the budget, we changed the law to allow non-contiguous service of alcohol, so that these outdoor dining can be both in the sidewalk cafe and also in the floating traffic lanes. It can also cross bike lanes. That was something that the electeds really wanted. In particular, in the Bronx, it was very much like, we need the COVID recovery, we need the businesses to come back to life. And I took a late night tour in the Bronx and also see that, there's not a huge amount of activity, in some of the more should be lively commercial areas. And so hopefully, this will help. The city council law did two things. One is allow service until midnight, and the other is that it does not actually say that you have to have tables and chairs. However, for us, when they apply to us, they actually have to show us a chart, the floor plan of tables and chairs. So just make sure you know that. Another thing I did, which everybody was super, super mad at me about, which is that I require another 30-day notice to the community board. And so that is what I did so that you can opine. If you did not get to opine in the DOT process because they did it in August, you actually get another bite at the apple because there is another 30-day notice to when they file what we call an alteration. The reason why we were able to do that is because they are basically getting now new rights to this municipality space. Throughout COVID, we allowed service, but it was a disclosure system. And we are now saying, no, actually, you have to show us that you have the right of the space over the municipality space. And so we're asking for a copy of the permit, your floor plan. There's actually a new form that's on our website to file for this alteration. It should be very simple. And we do not plan to pull anything out of the queue and address it unless there's a community board objection. So we're going to look at it and discuss it at full board if you don't want it. Short of that, they're gonna get it based on the way they agreed with the city. I don't know if you guys have usual hour stipulations for outdoor service. There's some boards that traditionally have done 10 and 11 or 10 o'clock across the board. We encourage you to work with that with the applicants. What I hear from other boards is that the applicants have been agreeing to them. But it's up to you. If you want 12 o'clock across the board, we're fine with that as well. But if you want shorter hours for certain businesses, you can have that discussion with them. We expect to extend our deadline, but we expect all of this somehow to get done before April.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yep. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So email me if you have policy questions, and call David if you have individual questions.
If it's okay for our members, if you want to get questions together, we'll make sure that they both get them, and we'll try to get answers in that way as well, and then we can work out.
Absolutely. And if
Any other
members
follow-
have questions, they can call me. This is my work cell. You guys can text me. I'm very reachable, and this is just a start. It was so nice to meet all of you.
Same here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
So we do have a second item, so I appreciate the patience of our next speaker, which is, I'm sorry if I say it wrong, Xin-Rui Lee.
Hi everyone. I know you guys just had a big data information dump, but sorry to contribute to that. I'll try to keep it brief. So my name is Xin-Rui. I'm the community engagement specialist at the New York City Independent Budget Office. Today I'm basically just giving a brief overview of the work that we do and what kind of data reporting services we can provide for you and your communities. Can I just get a brief show of hands who knows who IBO is, the Independent Budget Office? Anybody out there? No? Okay, great. So we got a few people who don't know. So next slide, how do I? Okay, perfect, thank you. So what is IBO? IBO is a nonpartisan city agency that provides data-driven fiscal and policy insights into how the New York City government operates and the services it provides for its residents. When I say nonpartisan, I really mean that we do not report to the mayor's office or any other elected officials. Our primary function is really to provide information for city council members and the general public. So how we do that is through three annual charter mandated reports, which are published in accordance with other major budgetary actions of the city. We also have year-round output, such as reports based on interests of our own analysts and their own expertise, and also reports that answer questions from council members and the community. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm just going to move on to the next slide to talk more about those annual charter mandated reports. Also, at any point, if there's anything you need clarification on, please just stop me and let me know. So here's a timeline of kind of the general fiscal budget, annual fiscal year of New York. We're at the star now, so right before November, where the first quarter plan will be released. So we're already at the beginning of fiscal year 2025. And right after the November plan is published, IBO will publish our first charter mandated report, which kind of reviews the first quarter plan and provides our own personal forecasts for the future. Moving into the next calendar year, 2025, the preliminary budget from the mayor's office should be published, at which point IBO will then publish our second preliminary budget report. And then, come April, usually the state would have published their enacted New York State budget by April 1st. And then, at which point, the city will publish its executive budget to reflect the changes of the state. And then, IBO will publish our final charter mandated report, which will make recommendations, make forecasts, depending on our own data. So I think one helpful way to think about IBO, sorry, I need to pull this guy up one more time, is that whilst being a city government agency, we operate independently. And a helpful way to conceive of us is that within the city budget process, we are sort of an additional source of revenue and expenditure forecasting, separate from the Office of Management and Budget, as well as the City Council. Historically, we are kind of a middle ground between those two entities, and our primary concern really is accuracy of data. So, are there any questions at this point? No? Okay. So apart from the charter mandated reports, our year-round work includes reports I mentioned previously that are published whenever, with a news cycle, if something interesting happens and our experts pick it up, or if something jumps out at them within the budget and they do a deeper dive. An example is today we actually just published a report on staffing of HRA and the caseload for applications to SNAP and cash assistance, and how that is impacting processing times. So you guys can read that today on our website. Our other work output is our testimonies at city council hearings. Recent examples would be research and fiscal projections of New York City's legal cannabis market, amongst many others. And finally, we also do presentations, so presentations such as this to kind of spread awareness about IBO. We also do Budget Basic 101 presentations to community boards or anywhere that we think is relevant. We're really excited to start presenting at high schools, so if you guys have any schools that you think would be interested in the New York City budget process, we're super happy to go and teach them a little bit about it. Yeah, so let me see. Oh, and one other thing is we have a video series on demystifying the school budget, where you can actually kind of follow along and look at your own school budget and figure out where to access it and how to read it and how you can use it to understand the funding of your own school. And we are also happy to have our analysts and experts speak to you about your own district. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit more about those reports I mentioned. So the 3 charter mandate reports that are aligned with budget actions of the city. We have the year-round reports published regularly. We had about 60 last year, and then testimonies and presentations. So for the reports, I'm going to go into a little more detail on 2 recent reports that we published, and I picked them specifically because there's some interesting findings that are relevant to the Bronx. The first being our education indicators. So every year, IBO publishes our education indicators, which are a review of data from the Department of Education. We have a pretty big education team. And we look at this data to understand indicators such as student demographics, student achievement, teacher demographics, principal demographics, and all sorts of cool stuff you guys can see on the website. So I specifically took out student enrollment from 2014, 2015 to 2023, 2024. So since 2015-2016 school year, we've seen a consistent decrease in enrollment in traditional public schools, except for the past 2023-2024, where we saw an increase of 6,000 students. And it's interesting to look at this together with charter school enrollment. Whilst there are far fewer students enrolled in charter schools, as you can see in the graph, there has been a consistent year-on-year increase. While the pandemic slowed that down, the school year saw a larger increase than in recent years in 2023-2024. Do keep in mind that all this data, there's a lot that goes behind it. So it's not like a one-for-one transfer of student enrolling in rather than traditional public schools to charter schools. But I only raise this as an interesting data point because you can see it's like quite a stark trend. There also is like a general decrease in school-going children across New York City, so that can help explain part of the traditional public school enrollment. But yeah, so I show this so that in the next slide, we can see that there's actually a really large concentration of enrollment in charter schools in the Bronx specifically. The differences in enrollment between traditional public schools and charter schools vary very significantly between the boroughs. And traditional public schools saw an increase in enrollment in Manhattan and Queens, no change in Brooklyn and Staten Island, and a decrease in the Bronx of 1.59%. And then except for Brooklyn, which had no change, charter schools saw increases in enrollment in all boroughs, and the largest increases being Queens and Staten Island, but also a noticeable increase in the Bronx of 09%. So I bring this to your attention just because it's an interesting data point that I noticed in these reports regarding the Bronx specifically. And if you want to know more about our education indicators, you can look on our website, but also you can reach out to Julia Conrad, our Assistant Director of Education. I can give you her email after that, or if anyone wants to copy it right now, there it is. All right. So the second report that I will be sharing with you guys are water bills. Very exciting. Examining the rate setting and billing structures of water bills in New York City. So New York, fun fact, has the largest water and sewage system in the United States. And the city's water system is primarily funded by property owners. And how our water bills are calculated, there are a few different structures. So 2 structures that I wanted to share with you guys that are relevant for the data I'm going to show in just a little bit are metered water bills and the multifamily conservation program flat rate structure. So for metered water bills, that's kind of like we all are familiar with that concept where you get charged based on how much water you use. But there also exists in New York City the MCP flat rate structure, where if you meet a certain set of requirements, that being having a multifamily residential building of 4 or more units, you can opt in to the MCP, and you'll be charged a flat rate. But also saying all this, this doesn't really affect renters. This is more of a property owner issue, so just keep that in mind. But why I bring this to your attention is because it's interesting how, as you can see in this figure, this heat map, districts in the Bronx have the highest share of MCP water bills in New York City. And this just has implications on the way that you're charged for your water bill, the kind of incentives that your property owners have to conserve water. If you're having a flat rate, naturally, they wouldn't mind if you're using a ton of water rather than less. And yeah, if you're wondering why maybe your water bill is just always the same, this might be the reason. Yeah, and those are the two reports that I just wanted to share with you guys, and that's all. If there are any questions regarding the kind of work output we have, I'm happy to take them, or you guys can email us. If there is, for example, any kind of like policy changes that you're trying to work with your community to get moved along, we can put out data reports that answer specific questions. Like I said, we just published one on HRA and benefit staffing. That was actually a request from a university. And yeah, so you can feel free to just email me and I'll pass you along to the relevant specialists. Cool. Are there any questions at all?
Thank you very much for that. Just so that everybody knows, we do have the slides and they'll be shared right after the meeting. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Any questions?
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your patience. With that, that concludes the presentations, but if there are any announcements from the community boards or city council members at this time? Yeah. We have a few events that are coming up, and I just want to start with, there's a Vital Parks for All this evening at the Lincoln Hospital Auditorium. It starts at 6:30. We're partnering with Commissioner Donahue. I'm pretty sure you guys may have received some kind of presentation, but this is going to be a town hall so that we get to hear from the communities out there regarding their parks. We also have a Co-op City Town Hall that we're partnering with the Bronx District Attorney, Darcel Clark, State Senator Jamal Bailey, Assembly Member Mike Benedetto, and New York City Council Member Kevin Riley, and that's happening tomorrow at the Dreiser Auditorium in Co-op City from 6 to 8. And then Halloween is in the air, so we have several events that are being held throughout the borough. There's one on October 25th that we're partnering with Councilmember Marmorato, and it's going to be a Halloween skate park at the Loretto Playground, and that'll start at 4. So please have fun with that. There's a Halloween parade on October 26th, and that's a host of partners. We also are Kevin Riley, Jamal Bailey, Benedetto. We're all partnering. These flyers are all available outside, so you guys can take some home with you. We also have, the YMCA is also having a trunk or treat on Saturday, October 26th, from 12 to 3. And that's in partnership with Bronx Cares, Assemblymember Carl Heastie, Jamal Bailey, and Councilmember Riley. And our last but not least, the 40th Precinct Council and Community Board 1 is having their Safe Halloween Street Treats on October 31st at the 40th Police Precinct new building. So that'll be awesome to see. That's also several partners involved. So we welcome everybody. Enjoy the festivities of Halloween. Be safe. And again, our next meeting is going to be on November 18th. For the Borough Board, and the Borough Service Cabinet will be on November 6th. Again, I thank you for your time and your patience. And these topics were very important. I definitely do appreciate the State Liquor Authority taking the time to go over our concerns and listening to us. I believe there might be some future meetings with the SLA, since there's a lot of stuff that's in the works, so I will keep you posted. So again, thank you very much for your time, and have a safe day.